Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We're sorry about the delay. Okay, so I'm going to actually welcome everyone once again. I thought I welcomed everyone before now. So it's an honor to have you all here today as we gather to explore the theme redefining leadership for today's Africa, adjusting the way we lead to better suit our current realities. We're excited to have you, and we look forward to an evening filled with impactful conversation and then discussion from our speakers. And I hope that we're going to go on with something very powerful today. So, without wasting too much of our time, we're going to invite our first speaker, which is Miss Nikesa. Guys, welcome her. Thank you, Ma.
Thank you, Miracle, for having me, and I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Good. Well, let me start by introducing myself. As Miracle said, my name is Nekesa, and I'm based in Nairobi. I have worked in the tech and innovation space for, let's say about 12 to 15 years. I'm doing different things. My first job in the space was with the iHub, which is an Asian hub based in Nairobi. And then after that, I moved to AfriLabs, which is a network of innovation hubs with its headquarters in Nigeria, but really doing work across the continent. And I think I had to share just a little story about purpose and about timing, timing like when everything kind of falls into place the way it should. And then I'm going to ask you to park that until the very end of my keynote. So, like I said, I worked with the iHub, and I worked with the iHub for about 8 years. And in my time with the iHub, they were very formative years. I learned a lot of stuff that was happening the innovation and tech space in Kenya in that time. But one of the other things that I learned during this time was, or rather, I came to a realization that the work that we were doing at the IHAB, while it was impacting not the country but continent, that a lot of our stories that we shared with the world were actually Nairobi-centric stories. And I suspect that a lot of you might be in the same position when you think about the countries that you come from, major cities, and what discrepancies there are between those major cities and some of the remote areas in your country. And so for us, when we spoke about connectivity, when we spoke about innovation and access to people and resources, we really, to be honest, were talking about Nairobi and perhaps any other major cities that we have, but not about remote towns and other areas in the country. And that began to bother me quite a bit. And it soon came time for me to map my path out of the IHUB. And one of the things that I promised myself was that I wanted for my next move to be an opportunity to impact either the country or impact the continent. And I wanted to learn about the diversity that existed across the continent and what individual and collective needs were. And so my job at AfriLabs was God-sent. It was very timely. I literally walked out the IHUB one day and walked into AfriLabs the next day. Just the way that everything conspired was perfect. And while at AfriLabs, I feel I got almost everything that I was looking for, because in fact, initially I'd said I want to learn more about my country, but with AfriLabs, because it is a Pan-African network of innovation hubs, I was able to learn about 400 plus innovation hubs across Africa and what they were doing, and by extension, what the innovation spaces in these different countries that the hubs represented were doing. And I worked there as director of strategy, and so my work involved talking to innovators, talking to hubs, and really learning the pain points of these different organizations and countries, and ways in which AfriLabs could support that. And so I found that work extremely impactful, and I worked with AfriLabs for 2 years. But after 2 years, and also work as director of strategy, my work was to develop a strategy for the organization to deliver, to its members. And once I had developed this strategy, I began to get that itch, and I wondered what next for me. But then again, I wanted my next move to be meaningful and to build off of the work that I had done at AfriLabs. And one of the big lessons that I had learned while at AfriLabs was that we sometimes fell into the trap of being too inward looking, and not as concerned or as interested as we should be with what was happening outside of our immediate spaces. And so for me, our immediate space was what is happening in other continents. What are other innovation hubs in other countries doing? How is innovation being fostered on other continents? And what are those points of intersection that we can have between Africa and innovators in other continents? And so I began to ask myself those questions quite a bit. But also, after many years of working with innovation hubs and working with innovators, I think I was suffering a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out. It's one thing to support an innovator. It's another thing to be an innovator yourself. It's one thing to support someone running a business. It's another thing to run a business yourself. And so I supported other people for the longest time, and which I do not regret at all. One of the things that one of our pastors shared with us a few years ago was sometimes the best way to discover your own purpose and define your own vision is by helping someone else define their purpose and their vision. And so I really loved those formative years, that I'd had with IHUB and AfriLabs. But I felt that increasingly now, and I'm not an innovator. I mean, I'm not an entrepreneur yet, so I'm about to announce my business. I'm not there, but I feel I'm definitely on my way there. But I felt really clear that my next move was going to be involved in a startup or involved in an organization that was specific to a sector, and basically roll out my sleeves and get my hands dirty. So no longer being agnostic and supporting innovators, regardless what sector they were in, but finding one sector that I felt extremely passionate about and that I wanted to do some work in. And this was at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I remember that I was going on LinkedIn quite a bit, just looking for, what next. And this organization kept popping up because they were doing a lot of work. Around the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was a familiar organization because I had supported them while they were at the IHAB many, many, many years ago. And so it's really interesting for me that I knew this organization 10, 12 years ago. At that time, I didn't feel that there was a match between me and them. But that 12 years later, with everything that had happened with the organization and with myself, it now felt as though there was a connection there that needed to be made, right? And so that's what I meant about the timing. But then also about purpose, I love the work that MEDIC was doing, and MEDIC is the organization that I work with now. I loved that they were looking to democratize healthcare. I loved that they were working with community health workers to support them by developing technology through which they could deliver care to some of the hardest to reach areas. And as everyone was going through the pandemic, I'm sure we began to realize the importance. Me, I did as well. And at that point, I knew that what I wanted for myself next was to be involved in healthcare. Now, it took me about a year to actually get this job at MEDIC. So it didn't happen instantly. And maybe that's a story for another day, around resilience or just, when you want something to truly go for it. But yeah, so let's pack that story. And that was a story about me constantly searching for purpose, and also where that purpose meets the timing. And for me, purpose met the timing when I felt that my next step was really to go into the health tech space. And I reconnected with an organization that I knew. And so there was some familiarity there. And it was a perfect time for us to connect. And I now work there as director of community. So let's now move to health systems and the demands of health systems. One of the things that struck me during the COVID-19 pandemic, I feel this was highlighted, and I hope that you guys saw it as well, was the interconnectedness between our health systems and many other things. So the interconnectedness between our health systems and economy or security or agriculture. And for me, the way that I experienced it was with our health system fragmenting, there was economic instability. Healthcare cost a lot more and was a lot harder to come by. Our populations, people were not healthy, so therefore they weren't going to work. They needed a lot of resources for treatment and for care. And so a lot of people really just couldn't afford to be in a pandemic, and even countries couldn't afford to be in a pandemic. And the way that I experienced security was that my neighborhood was a lot more insecure than it had ever been, and I mean, there was different reasons for this. People were losing their jobs, people were getting desperate and wanting different ways to get money, to get resources, to get food, and so a health crisis was actually destabilizing communities because it was straining resources, and it was making, you were just so vulnerable. And with agriculture, the way that I experienced this was, just basically that if people weren't healthy, then they weren't farming, which means that we were seeing a reduction of availability of things that we would typically take for granted. We'd always find them in the shops, we'd find them in the markets. But now people weren't as productive as they used to be. Again, because they were sick. This affected our nutrition, it affected our access to food and so on. And so there's this interconnectivity that we can't get away from. And you find that it's, as even if you're not in the health sector, it's so important that you pay attention to your health, because ultimately it impacts the way that you run your life, the way that you run your business. And I suppose this is one of the reasons why healthcare in organizations is so important when when your employer is able to offer you healthcare. So it's a no-brainer that health systems around the world need to be resilient. They need to be effective. They need to be transparent and accountable, because they impact so many other things. But I thought tonight to just focus on 4 things. And so what do health systems need? And so by extension, what is the role of leaders, in developing or improving these health systems? And those 4 things are: 1, health systems need to be adaptable. 2, health systems need to be sustainable. 3, health systems need to be human-centered. And 4, health systems need to be inclusive. And so by extension, leaders need to be able to create these kinds of health systems that are adaptable, sustainable, human-centered, and inclusive. So let's speak about adaptability. We live in a very evolving demographic, right? And what happens with this evolving demographic is that the health needs then get a lot more complex. So let me explain what I mean. One example is urbanization. And so this is basically people moving from rural areas to urban areas. And the proportion of Africans currently residing in urban areas has actually been steadily increasing. So in early 2000, we were at about 35% Africans reside in urban areas. We're now, at least by 2023, we're 45%. And so people are moving to urban areas looking for opportunities, looking for better paying jobs and all of this. So what's happening with that, and I don't know if you're experiencing these where you live as well, but definitely we're experiencing it in Nairobi. What's happening with that is that places are getting overcrowded. There's lots of buildings coming up to accommodate people, lots of inadequate infrastructure, so are we able to get water and food and other basic amenities to people where they need them? It's becoming increasingly hard. There's also environmental risks. And ultimately what this means is that it impacts public health, because you're talking about resources that haven't been created for the amount of people or for the number of people living in particular areas. Right. So urban growth is a huge concern. And then also think about our population. And I know that nowadays when people talk about population, and maybe one of the speakers actually today, we'll do this as well, when we talk about our demographic in Africa, we're usually talking about the youthful demographic, which is absolutely true. And I do hope to hear some of the amazing work that the other speakers will speak to around this youthful demographic that we have and how we can harness it. But the thing is that there's other populations growing, and so generally people are living longer, right? And so we are increasingly having a lot more older people or elderly people, in our communities. And what that means is that things like non-communicable diseases are manifesting more. We're seeing more heart disease, we're seeing more diabetes, but then also because of lifestyles. It's not necessarily just elderly people, but then, it could also be lifestyles. And so what that means is that there's more care needed, there's more long-term management need, and we're finding that our health systems are not necessarily equipped. In fact, you'll find in some places people say, but isn't that a white man's disease? What are you talking about? High blood pressure? What are you talking about? Diabetes? We don't get that. But really it's that previously we weren't diagnosing it, or we weren't diagnosing it as much as we do now, right? And actually non-communicable diseases are among the top causes of death across Africa now. And then while we're dealing with that and still trying to come to terms with that, there's still the infectious diseases, there's still HIV, there's still stuff like that. So what's happening is that that our health systems have to adapt, and they have to adapt to different kinds of health challenges simultaneously, right? And so this is what I mean when I say that the health systems need to be adaptable, and our leaders need to be able to quickly adapt our health systems into what we need at any one time. Are we able to do that now? I don't know. Think about your circumstances where you are, and maybe tell us in chat, or just think about it. Are your local governments, are your local leaders able to adapt? Or while going through the COVID-19 pandemic or the recent, monkeypox, were your systems able to quickly adapt? Second is inclusiveness. And here we talk about how do we ensure that health systems are taking care of vulnerable populations. And so, like your women, your children, your elderly, people with disabilities, how are they receiving care? How is the care tailored to their needs to ensure that they don't lose out, because of where located, because of the vulnerabilities that they have? How are your health systems built to ensure that there's equitable healthcare delivery? Or think about the different barriers that we have, and this could be infrastructure, it could be financial, it could be logistical. And this is why we see increasingly investments in things like telemedicine, in mobile clinics, community health workers, and I hope you're familiar with community health workers. This is a space in which I work. And in fact, in Kenya, one of the things that the national government has begun to do is that it's whitelisting the devices that community health workers use, because community health workers in Kenya and in many other countries, I think now, deliver care with the help of a device that walk around their communities with. So these devices are, at least our app is offline first. And now with the help of government, we're beginning to whitelist to ensure that community health workers have access to data, as and when they need it. So are we working, and our leaders working in spaces or in ways in which they're able to remove these barriers that we're currently facing and ensure that everyone is included in the work that they're looking to do? Or think about building trust and representation, and think about some of the unique cultures that you might have, which sometimes may make it difficult for you to access the kinds of resources, the kinds of amenities that you're looking for. Do we have the kinds of leaders that pay attention and listen to culture and don't shy away from it or shun it? Do we have the kind of leaders who integrate traditional practices with modern care? Right, so that they can promote the kind of workforce diversity that's needed now and foster that trust, and reflect community values. And third, I said, is our health systems need to be sustainable. So sustainability obviously means access to resources and consistent access, to resources. So you definitely always need the money to run, whatever the solution is or the system, that you're running. But it also means the workforce. Our leaders investing enough in our workforce to make sure that they prioritize the care and not just financial care, but other kinds of care for workers. Are they making sure that that the workforce is trained so that they're able to work and work long term within these health systems, right? So those are two aspects of sustainable, but there's definitely several more. And then finally, human-centered. How are we ensuring that our health systems are human-centered? How are we ensuring that we understand patient needs, that we understand their preferences, that we understand their cultural contexts, and that we ensure that the care that we then deliver to them is tailored with all of this in mind, and that they have this satisfaction that they experience when they're getting healthcare. And that ultimately what this does is that it results in better health outcomes, because when you present with patients with opportunities where they know they're being heard, where they know they're being understood, where they know they're being listened to, then they're more likely to come to you for care. And so ultimately, as society, have better health outcomes. So how are we ensuring that humans, that people, that those patients are at the center of the health system, that we build the trust between them, the patients, us, the providers, whether it's, we're health providers or technology providers and so on, how we're ensuring that we offer effective treatment to the humans that we intend it for. And how we empowering them in their health journey also, how we ensuring that they're educated and that they share in the decision making around how they participate in their care. So I want you to think about those questions and what the role of leaders would be. And Miracle, if you're there, I'd love for you to now play me one of the videos that we have. This is the video of Wendo, Heroes in the Field. And so I'd love for you to watch this. This is a lady called Wendo, who's a friend of mine. And I would love for you to pay attention to the work that she's doing, how she's doing it, and how the people that she works with relate to her. And then we can keep talking.
The best in 2024, fully remote to 12.
As you know, it's very stubborn. Some people hate it, but every part of a dandelion can be used. Leaves, the roots, the flower, the feathers when you blow them, everything is significant. So for me, dandelion is very significant because it represents me. The resilience, the stubbornity. Dandelion because the health and livelihoods of youth and women in very marginal. I live among girls who are denied education, and I live amongst men who could be change makers that will change this narrative. About 6 years ago, we were distributing sanitary pads in a school that is mixed. And this was the norm. We asked boys to be outside and we gave the girls sanitary pads inside in secret. And slowly the boys came out and found me and asked me, Wendo, what is this, you girls? And don't you understand that at the end, we are the decision makers at the community level? At that point, I came back and I sat with the team and said, we're getting this wrong. If we don't put everyone on the table, nothing will ever change. Started at that level.
The theme of Boys for Change that we are alive, we are as
Men in our they're visionaries. There are some who have been brought up by single moms, some who have seen their beat their mothers, some who have been fighting for their sisters to be taken to school. They understand. Are forced to reckon with because they not only champion and women empowerment, they're creating spaces for women to become leaders. I don't know if there's anything more powerful in a generation of young men who want women to be leaders. We started seeing better performance for girls in schools. We started seeing the confidence of girls improving. We started seeing a more cohesion within communities. And in just 3 years, we had almost 99% transition of girls from primary school to high school because we were engaging in a conversation. You can never clap with one hand. We need each other for us to have sustainable change, and that's the message I always pass and what I strive to. You might see some dandelion t-shirt members on gender-based violence sites as medics. See them as men champions, training girls on menstrual hygiene, training with women on economic empowerment, mentoring other men to be better at championing for women's rights. Or you can see at the community change themselves. We've given contraceptive to over 30,000 women in rural areas. Over 5,000 women have gone through our street business school, and 5,000 boys today champion women's rights. And over 6,000 girls are in Girls for Leaders program. Leader just saying a transformation leader or just a compassionate leader is her soul is what makes her unique.
When I don't know what to say about Len because she's everything.
More women out there trying their best, but the system won't let them because they're female. I'm the unlikely person to create change. I'm the person who no one believed would do it. And that's why I'm doing it.
Thank you, Miracle, for sharing that. I hope we got most of it. I know it was a little choppy in some places. But I hope what you got from that video is that Wendo is a lady who's passionate about working in a community, and it's a community that is quite remote. She saw a challenge and she decided to address it. And she says, if you caught the bit where she says that she lives just 20 minutes, from this area. And so she does know the pain points. She's close enough to understand the needs and the pain points and the ways of working of this community. And so she set out to do work and to support the women and the girls in the community, and that there were cultural, there was cultural ways of doing things and presenting information she had to pay attention to, in her work, and so to distribute pads to girls, to teach girls about their periods, she ended up using the men, and who would have thought? But really what it was in this particular community, messages were passed on, decisions are made, by men. And I think that we maybe see this in a lot of our African communities, and so how do you not let that destabilize you, but let that help you, is a challenge that she had and that she was able to overcome. And I wonder if you saw or if you listened to how she was described by the people that she works with. So she was described as a lady of the people. Someone you can't put her in a box, right? And someone else say it's, in fact, initially they were speechless, and then they said she's everything, right? And I hope that one day, someday, you come into Kenya and you get the opportunity to visit Wendo and the work that she's doing in these different remote areas. And you'll realize that the passion that you get in the videos is just a fraction of the passion that you feel when you're on the ground with her, in the interactions that she has with people, in the things that people have to say about her, in the impact of the work, that she does. And so this brings me to, I guess, how we lead, or how I feel that we should be leading, and borrowing a lot from Wendo as a leader and other similar leaders, whether a president or a corporate leader or a startup founder. For me, these are the lessons that I hope that you take away with you, that the role of leaders, regardless what kind of leader that you are, is in meeting the complex demands of the space in which you work. And you will do this by building. Is to build, and it is to build. You're going to find that a lot of time you're building infrastructure, or you're building a lot of work that needs to come in the. And actually, I think things that we need to come to terms with as leaders, it's sometimes we may not reap the fruit of the work that we do now. It is quite possible that the seeds that we plant now are going to be our children and our children's children, and we need to be comfortable within our hearts and be satisfied with the work that we do now, even if we may not be able to reap its fruit. The importance of building, whether you're building health systems or whatever it is that you're building, is that you are building essential structures, you're building essential connections, you're building essential capacity, right? And so the first thing to think about as leaders that we need to build is that we need to build collaborations, or you might think about it as relationships, or you might think about it as finding shared value with other people or other organizations. And I like to think of it as building ecosystems. So I feel that leaders today need to be building ecosystems. And if you think of ecosystem, it is different beings that complement each other within an environment, right? And so it's, for example, the way, I don't know if you've seen wildlife, maybe see a rhino or a hippo, a little bird on top of it picking at its ticks. What bird is doing is it's offering it relief from the ticks or the different bugs that it's picking from its skin. Bird is also getting fed. So that's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. And that's the way that ecosystems work, where different people, different organizations bring something to the table. I feel in a world no longer about how much money you have or how good or how much invested in public relations of your organization, but it's about how you're able to figure out your skills, but what it is that you need to do within an ecosystem, and who else within that ecosystem to do it. And then with humility, and with foresight, making a decision to work collaboratively. And I think that's what shared value is. And so leaders today really need to be building shared value. The ways that we did this with the work that we do at Medic is that we, with this collective of organizations, some of them technical, some of them not technical, some of them are funding organizations, some of them are public sector organizations, and all these organizations generally come together towards digital health, in the country, in Kenya, in other parts of the continent as well. The second thing that you need to be doing is building teams. So what this means is not just that you're hiring, but then also that you're investing in people. And you can see that one of the things that Wendo did was that she invested in the men to teach them how to teach the women. She invested in a culture, and I'm going to make it work. We're going to do this together, right? And you need to invest in your work, and what that means time is that you are giving them that we do with community health workers. They salaried, they're supplied, they're skilled, they're supplied, they're supervised. And what this means is that, yes, they do get an honorarium for the work that they do. Yes, they do supervised. And so there's a way to ensure that there's accountability for that. 3, they do get skilled. That means that we invest in teaching them how to use the tools that we give them to deliver care. And 4, they are supplied. That means they have the medicines and the devices that they need to go, to communities and support them. So you need to build your teams and do it very intentionally. And remember, we are building for the future. And then 3, you need to build your data. We live in a world where we can't make decisions, we can't make up things. Everything has to be backed by data. And so as a leader, you need to be, you really need to be thinking about what data can I collect from this and how can I use it and how is it going to help me inform decisions. And this is so important in healthcare, and I'm sure for other sectors as well, because decisions can't be made on pandemics, decisions can't be made on how to deliver care, decisions can't be made on how to distribute human resources of doctors and nurses if we don't have the data to back up why we'd want to do it that way, right? And so as leaders, we need to understand data and use it. And then leaders need to build leaders, right? And so you can't lead in isolation. So what are you doing to build the people that will take over from you? And I'm probably going to say this until you get tired of me, but remember, we are building not to reap the fruit ourselves, but we're building so future generations can build it. So how are you ensuring that the organization that you're building outlives you and that it has the leaders that it needs to have? That means you're building your leadership at all levels. You're making sure that the way that you're running your organization, if you were to step out for a day, step out for a month, step out for the year, that you build enough leaders that your organization remains sustainable. And then finally, we're building rules and laws and regulations. One of the things that has helped the work that we do at Medic be so successful in the African countries where it is successful is that rules, laws, and regulations have been built around community healthcare. And what this means is that it doesn't matter who the government of the day is. The work that we do is ingrained in laws and regulations and policies of those countries, and those countries have committed to run community healthcare in certain ways, right? And so what that means is that there's a supportive health policy, there's accountability and transparency. And I know that some of you may be listening and saying, okay, but that's happening at a national level. What am I doing making laws on? But this translates to any space that we're working in. We need to ensure that the cultures that we're building, that the rules we're putting in place, that our ways of working are not centered on us as leaders, but then are centered on the organization and what makes sense for that organization. So I guess in closing, what I'd love to share is increasingly driven by a search for purpose. And you may have seen this in some of the work that Wendo does and the people that work with her too. We're searching for purpose. We're no longer just doing things for a paycheck. The money is great, but really we're looking for purpose. We're looking for meaning. We're looking for alignment. We want for the work that we do to have impact and want to be able to feel that impact. We want some kind of professional fulfillment from that impact. So as a leader and faced with the kind of workforce that we have today, that's not just looking for you to pay them, but they're looking for purpose, they're looking for alignment, how are you ensuring that you're building an organization where they find that and where that is constantly fostered, right? And so I'm going to leave it there at that question. And maybe if you already haven't answered how you're doing that, you can leave it in the chat. If not, I would love to continue this conversation with anyone who's interested. How do we make sure that as leaders, we continue to offer spaces where people can work and give themselves and share their purpose and their meaningful life with us in the workplace? And so on that note, I'm going to hand it back to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you for having me here.
So much, Mom. Thank you so much. So you have another video. Do you mind if I play that, or you want us to play that later?
I think I'll just leave that in the chat for anyone that's interested, just because I know we've run out of time, and also maybe the connection might not allow us to.
Okay, that's fine. So we're going to let our next speaker come up quickly, so we don't waste much of our time. So, Mr. Peter Quest, and I'm really grateful to Mr. Maxwell for helping us bring him. And then I don't know if Mr. Peter is around. Okay. It's really nice this year. We have a lot of Kenyan, and I'm really happy because I feel it's a wonderful country. So, okay. So Mr. Peter is from Kenya as well, and he'll be speaking shortly. I think probably if he is. Okay. Okay, Mr. Peter, if you're around, please let us know so that. Okay, so while we wait for Mr. Peter, Mr. Jackson will not be available, so we had a short video with him. So we're going to play the video while we wait for Mr. Jackson to join us. Okay, so are we ready? Okay, so let me see.
Who's decided that enough was enough. They wanted to utilize their own.
Okay, everyone, welcome to West Africa Young Leaders Conference. Today we have Mr. and Dr. Johnson. He probably won't be joining us live, so this is a recorded version of him speaking to us. And so you're welcome, sir, and you'll begin now. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here for this conference today. I think it is extremely important that we understand the potential of Africa because, I was reading some information yesterday and it indicated that the Congo has the ability to not only power all of Africa, but the Congo has the ability to feed all of Africa. As I look at what's going on in Burkina Faso, I'm seeing leadership at its best. I'm seeing a gentleman who's decided that enough was enough. They wanted to utilize their own resources, that being human capital as well as the resources underneath the minerals, in order to take care of their own destiny. Because I am a student of transformation and studying Burkina Faso, I have a model that I think that he has utilized in order to facilitate what's going on in Burkina Faso. With that said, I'm going to walk slowly through the model, briefly through the model, so you can get an understanding. What he's done in Burkina Faso is remarkable. Basically, he's taking over the resources of that country to transform that country into a powerhouse, both economically and both socially. That's been proven because there have been coups that have been attempted, that he survived. And also, the people want him to remain as president based upon what he's done. He's used the system from transformation, and there are 6 steps to that system. The first step is to self-organize. The second step is to recombine. The third step is to sense and respond. The fourth step is to learn and adapt. The fifth step is to seed, select, and amplify. And the last step is to destabilize. And in this movement in Burkina Faso, he's used all of those steps. And so I'll talk about each 6 of those steps individually very briefly. When you talk about self-organizing for transformation as he's done, it's about managing the systems from the bottom up where the most experience resides. As a leader, you need to understand that there's a need to learn how to influence the principles that affect better individual choices rather than managing the overall behavior. They grow their own food, provide for their own people, give the wealth that's there. And the benefits of organization are flexibility, robustness, innovation, and exploration. The second step that he's used is called recombine. And what he's done is proliferated connections, making the recombination of ideas quicker and more effective. It's an open sharing information amongst he and his team to share ideas more rapidly, be more innovative, increase the diversity of ideas. And this helps people grow personally, and it's helped them really take over their government and provide for themselves. The third step is to sit and respond. That means that you use real-time information in order to make decisions as to what you're going to do as it relates to do. And the benefits of it is to decrease the response time and making the decisions around how you're going to run your country, what you're going to grow, what you're going to nationalize. It allows for him and the country to develop their own strategies such that it grows outside of what they were accustomed to prior to taking over the country. And it creates a greater sense of agency, and they truly value and are more loyal to him, understanding what his vision is. Number 4 is learn and adapt. And so what they've been doing through this entire process is learning on the move, adapting on the move, so that they do what's best for their country. And with the benefits of this, it gives you a greater repertoire of possible responses for different people of Burkina Faso. It provides for the feedback on what is sensed, and then they respond to what's going on in the environment at that time. And it creates a sense of continuous incremental improvement, which they've been doing and we've been seeing on a day-to-day basis. The 5th step is to seed, select, and amplify. And that is to test as many options, diverse options as you can as to what are the best industries for Burkina Faso to enter into, given the resources that they have. So this allows for, and the benefit of this is to focus on a great quantity of ideas and then choose the quality ideas in and to create opportunities uh, destabilize, meaning that you want to continue to disrupt what is going on so that you can continue to grow. Because growth happens in discomfort, growth happens in destabilization. From how we can be better with the industry that we're creating or the industries that they're creating in the country and not be controlled by any others. Following transformation is very consistent with I've seen in transformation. He's done such a great job. And what Africans need to know, the brothers and the sisters on the continent need to know is that thank you for giving me this opportunity to briefly present uh, what I see to be the 6 steps that are being used in Burkina Faso as it relates to the trans.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Are you there?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm here. I'm here. And I guess I could ask you if there are any.
Okay.
Questions you may have for me.
Yes, yes, yes. We actually have a question for you. And so,
Okay, so without wasting too much of our time, we're going to let Mr. Peter join us now, and then from there we're going to give room for the questions to begin. So, Mr. Peter, you're welcome, sir. You can join now.
Um, Good evening.
Good evening, sir. You're welcome, sir. Thank you so much. We're very grateful for having you here today.
Yeah, I think we have planned this for a very long time, and this is the right opportunity for us to really get to learn. I've listened to just a minute. Let me deal with.
Mr. Peter has to take care of his child. So just few minutes, and then he's going to be back. So thank you so much once again. I want to say thank you to Miss Nikesa for that. So while we're waiting for him, okay, he's back. Thank you.
Yeah. So one, I want to thank you so much for this creation of this platform because I've really listened to very inspiring stories, and I think this is what Africa want to hear. It is in good faith that we have leaders who can share with us very important and educative messages that will inspire or perhaps help us grow organizations. And Miracle, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I think one of the areas that I appreciate is that it is open to is a continental discussion. I think at some point this might even go to a global level. But I think the topic of that you gave me on refining leadership in today's Africa makes a lot of sense in the context that Africa right now is looking to build leadership. And it makes a lot of sense that we are at this moment as young people to think through and dream big to see how possible this can actually be done. Sorry, Miracle, for just a minute.
Of that, Mr. Peter, we're here with you. Okay. I don't know if you'd give Mr. Peter some few minutes. Probably we should use the opportunity to play his Nikesa's video. I don't know, but let's see. Let's see. So, okay, while we wait, probably let's play that video and then we'll see. Okay. Okay.
There are some things that I maybe at times to forget. Unfortunately, I lost the first one. Already in 2021 December. Got pregnant immediately after the pregnancy that was I become sick. I was even saying, Mama, if I'm let them go. I still see Miriam. They tell me it has Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Nekasa Were, and I am technology for community health workers like you. We have partnered with a lot of organizations like Luala across the country, and the Ministry of Health, and the counties to develop the app features which you all use. ICHIS is the electronic community health information system. It is powered by the community health toolkit. That's what ICHIS is for, is to help you deliver the critical care to communities. But an app on its own will not save lives. It needs to be supported by a thriving ecosystem. 4.5 billion people still do not receive essential health services. Community health workers are important in a country like Kenya. We still have areas that do not have adequate health facilities. Community health workers are trusted members of their communities, the first level of critical health care that a lot of the world's population will ever receive. At first, it was like, what is it? Yeah, but after the training, we just found that it was all one thing. Yeah, everything is packed inside the itches. Yeah, the household register is there. The service delivery is there. Yeah.
It's so important to work with community health workers when we build this digital health because they understand their pain points, their needs.
In the past, they booked like the larger one. I was forced to carry it to the file facility. This one was the first one. My was register, and in 2023, this one, niches. I look after 33 households. One could call. Morning, I have an issue. So I could go there immediately. This is one of the households that I monitor. I'm going to assess it. Diana. Hi. So I needed to monitor her. The newborn and the mother. Each is helps me as a community health worker because all the information are
Oh no. When you listen to Maureen's story and hear how selfless she has been and how she has powered the work that she does, how can we not support that?
we don't want our community left behind. And I'm doing it on behalf of my daughter.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mama. Thank you too.
Okay.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay. So I should come back.
Community health workers. We're always there for one another.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. We're really grateful. So now we're going to head back, and thanks so much for Ms. Nekesa for that video. Really, it was really inspiring. Thank you so much. So we're going to let Mr. Peter join us again, and we're going to go from there. We're sorry about the noise behind the background for those of us who are joined. So we're going to have Mr. Peter back now. Mr. Peter, you're welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you again. That's the Kesa story is really genuinely inspiring. I mean, I was actually born in that county where she shot the video. It's there's so many heroes within our midst that sometimes we don't get an opportunity to celebrate them, and that's why I believe that such kind of platforms that we're given can actually inspire a lot of people to really invest more in the communities. So I listened to various speakers before, and one of the things that areas that I wanted to focus on, there are three areas that of importance when we talk about issues of leadership and how do we want to refine Africa. And I look at the vision. There's Agenda 2063, Kenya's what is called the Vision 2030. The potential for every leader to refine the future of any society. And I love the previous presenter, the madam, I think I don't remember her name. There's something she talked about. We are doing it for our future generation. We are not really doing it for ourselves. So most of the times when you have been given to positions of leadership, the most critical part of it is always remember there's a generation after us. And that has always been the drive, the focus of a transformational Africa. And I think that is where we need to head to. And this has to do with a lot of visioning, because here we are looking at the potential of Africa and who is this leader who is able to ignite and inspire societies to rise up and actually be accounted for. Then, of course, we are talking about long-term strategies. Who is this leader committed to see the vision of Africa being transformed? The other areas that I want us to look at is leadership that is empathetic, that is as empathy and audacity. That means this is the leadership that is both inclusive and both diverse, because we need to start feeling other people. I mean, I see societies and leaders that are more into themselves than to the people they serve, and it hurts a generation, especially the generation after ourselves. And the focus right now is that if we are to transform this Africa of ours, we have to start thinking about others as well as we think about ourselves. We have to debate in our minds that we are doing it, we owe it to a generation after us, and of course, to those within us who have trusted us with that position of leadership. Other issues that are very critical is issues of integrity and accountability. And this is where most of the time in African context of leadership, I think we fail a lot. There is more politicking than service delivery. And there is a lot of wastage in politicking than development. And because our diverse interests and personal interests always come alongside, development has always delayed. And our communities continue to face that kind of lack of leadership. And therefore, if we are to look at the three areas, that is the vision, empathy, integrity, and we focus our leadership and investments around these areas, we will have transformed a good number of African continent to think and transform and do it for the community. There are a few things that I came up with that I think perhaps could be more important to that. I'm looking at a leadership that is thinking about current issues, emerging issues, tech issues. We're talking about demographic trends. Africa continuously is a youthful population, but are we taking advantage of that population to really invest a lot? Then, of course, we look at the challenges and opportunities that comes within our continent. And some of the areas that I'm thinking is that we have so much that we have not exploited. If we look at the tech world, we're still not as much as possible as we're not up there. Most of the technologies we're using are actually foreign-based. And our people continuously, especially those who are on social media, the content that we're generating, perhaps the enumeration of that is actually at a lower scale compared to those from Europe. Recently, I was in Italy, and one of the areas that we found very shocking is that Europeans get more pay than what our African continent gets. So that is a big challenge that we face and need to be addressed. And those purely are policy-related issues. Most of African governments need to sit down and think about how do we able to develop, come up with policies that we can hold accountable and to make sure that our people are really getting it right. Technology continues to be, again, a very serious game changer right now. There's a lot of digitalization. There's a lot of focus on that. So when we talk about the current leadership, we need, and most of us who are aspiring to be leaders, to think through how do we put our best investments in tech world. I think that is where we're heading it as a continent. And of course, our markets and our demographics continue to suffer, especially because of our later lack of skills or content in terms of how we manage our potential as a nation and as a continent. Then when it comes to economy and disparity, we realize that we are facing huge challenges, and there's a lot of brain drain, and there's a need that Africa now is thinking about looking for jobs at foreign lands and at global level. And this is really hurting our economy at some point, because we realize that most of the time is that we are sending out the best of our skills, and we are sending the best brains. So this is a challenge that perhaps need to be dressed up, and I think more discussion need to be held on these areas, and we need to look at it as a very critical lines of engagement. Issues of governance and political stability. This is one area that we as a number of African countries are still struggling with. And when the country is not stable politically, you realize that we lose a lot of time in terms of the time could be used for production. We're using it to address issues of peace and security. And a lot of investments go to those lines. So I think this is some of the refining moments that we need to look at. How do we have conversation with perhaps with politicians and leaders to really think through. But a lot of trends and a lot of efforts have been made in those sides. A number of countries in Africa still continue to enjoy a lot of peace and stability. But now the focus has always been there's more politics than development. It hurts. It is a challenge. It is something that we need to look at. And if you look at the kind of leaders that are being elected, it is worrying. It's the motivation to lead has lost its service delivery mantra. So it's more about what is it that is it for us than is it without us. So then we need to, the other areas that we need to talk about is addressing why traditional leadership approaches may fail. And I came up with some of the areas that I think perhaps why some of these old methods of leadership is failing is that one, the current old traditional ways of leading, which is mostly political oriented, continues to lack adaptability to current trends and technologies. And of course, when I talk about adaptability, is that there are ways leadership is being addressed currently vis-a-vis what it used to be. Right now, we're talking about creative governance, creative leadership. We're talking about more empathetic leadership rather than authoritative. Then, of course, our centralization and limited empowerment. So the leadership that we face currently, which is an old traditional methods of leadership, is that leadership is rotating around the people rather than being decentralized to every other part of the country or part of the continent. And perhaps this is a discussion that we need to hold with African Union to really emphasize that African leaders need to address their needs more than their personal needs. Then, of course, the limited empowerment. In this case, I'm talking about that there is a lot of chronism in governance and appointment of leadership, service delivery. I mean, it's really draining service delivery at some point, and that is very costly in nature. How do we navigate this importance of adaptive, culturally sensitive and progressive leadership? Is that we're talking about issues of we're talking about importance of this is that how do we come up with educative, maybe perhaps an incubation sort of leadership whereby we can actually incubate young leaders. All leaders have to go through some sort of education, some sort of exposures, so that perhaps by the time they get to that level of leadership, they are able to really serve the interests of the other people rather than themselves. So I find it quite interesting, and as we work, as for instance, where I work at Kenya School of Government, one of the focus that we emphasize on is service delivery to the people. And our areas of interest is that we continuously provide capacity building for both private and public in Kenya. And right now, I think 2 days ago, we had what is called Africa Schools of Government. We are trying to talk to African continent. How do we able to synchronize our training portfolio to enhance leadership, that is from the grassroots level, from the top level to the lowest level? Then how do we come up with very modern or current programs that are adaptive to changes and, of course, are very encouraging to growth and are more service driven to the people? Then, of course, we have also come up with programs that are youth centric. That means that we are setting up what is called innovation centers, or what most people call innovation hubs across the country. Right now, we have put a number of, we have 3 centers across the country, and of course, with Nairobi, I think we have 4. Now, if we don't create platform for young people to engage and to recreate themselves, we continuously not providing sufficient assistance to the growth of young people. And I think that has always been a problem that African nations are feeling. The investment that goes towards empowerment of young people continuously to decrease with time rather than increase. And this has really costed growth of this continent. Potentially, there's a lot of positive energy that is going to waste because most of this energy is not directed towards a tangible project and products. We are continuously wasting a lot of time to engage on projects and programs that are not globally competitive in nature. And this has slowed down. This has also led to depressions among young people. And the service delivery has also costed a lot of lives, especially in rural areas. Now, life in urban areas has to be addressed, and there has to be a very strong leadership in place because there's a lot of overpopulation and uprising of a lot of slums, and of course, this causes a lot of crimes within the urban centers. So the conversation that we're pushing through is that we need to perhaps find a common agenda, and that common agenda is how do we refine proper leadership that actually are people-driven rather than individual-driven? And then how do we realign economical growth vis-a-vis political growth? Because we realize most of the time is that we are not emphasizing on what is really important. That is, we're talking about the health sector, the agricultural sector, which are actually the backbone of our society. We're talking about sports. And at some point, I feel like if we nurtured a lot of environment that sportsmen and women could grow, it really create a lot of value. And how do we able to really perhaps either learn or borrow ideas from global market that can actually be incubated or can actually be implemented locally to enable young people use their skills and talent to really nurture themselves and grow. Organizations will continue to fail if leadership is not focused towards embracing those potential platforms that every other person within an organization, or in this case within a country or within a continent, can able to really be part and parcel of development. If we narrow down development to few people or few families or all these things, because if you look at the leadership in Africa, you can actually tell the connectivity of it. And leadership is always centralized towards a family rather than towards a society. And perhaps since we have a very common platform, that is Africa Union, some of these discussions need to be tabled at the helm of Africa Union so that we find a voice to communicate and perhaps sometimes even hold presidents accountable. A president is immune to a lot of laws within a country. And sometimes this hurts nations, especially developing nations like Africa, because we can't really be much. We can't really hold the presidency a lot of accountability because of that kind of laws that are passing. And some of them will be excited to extend their term limit in office, which is actually another cost effective. That's very costing and hurting a nation to some extent. So, Miracle, I want to basically conclude in saying the following. Africa has the potential to rise up, to connect, and to engage with global matters. We have the right knowledge, we have the right attitudes towards growth. We have the young people that are potentially um, ready to work and, of course, to engage. And we have leadership that actually can be engaged at some point. But we still believe that there's a lot of work need to be done, especially how do we deviate from politics? And that is hurting our nations. We have to refocus on our economical growth rather than politics. We have to look at those platforms like I talked about agriculture, we talked about issues of skills and talents, we talk about issues of technology. We have to put or push the government to put a lot of investments to these platforms. And most importantly is that we have to have a government that is accountable, a government that is development driven, government that thinks about the future, a government that is willing to lend to the future, not the government that is willing to borrow from the future. So to this point is that I want to thank you so much, and I'm here to engage as much as possible and see how much we can add to value our continent as a team. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Peter. I'm really grateful, and thanks so much. So before we move to the panel section, what we would have activated both the speakers and then a panel questions. I want to go back to Mr. Jackson. It's questions that we asked him, so that from there after that we'll go ahead. Okay, so
it's a brief question. It's a very brief question, and it's more like asking for your opinion, your advice. Right now in Africa, we're through a lot, and I think it's a global issue. But in Africa, our challenges are quite very unique. What's your advice for young leaders, for young entrepreneurs, for young professionals in various fields of life? And how do you think we can position ourselves to fully adopt, how we live and how we lead to suit our current realities, knowing that you have even a brief knowledge and background knowledge about what's happening in Burkina Faso? It means that you understand the challenges of Africans. So what's your advice for young professionals and young leaders in various fields in Africa?
That's an excellent question, because as I've studied the continent of Africa, studied the leaders there, too often the leaders there want to follow what they think the West wants them to do. So I think you have to create a mindset where we have to do what Africans have to do what is best for Africans. There's no need to depend on the West, because we've seen from history what has happened by the West. We can see what's happening now. I know that there's U.S. military that's on in certain countries in Africa, and that's only to continue to maintain access to resources. But there are leaders who have to decide that we must do what's best for Africans. So when you talk about young leadership and the young leaders coming along, they have to understand from a holistic perspective what's actually needed in Africa for Africa to be self-sufficient. I understand that manufacturing facilities are needed in every country, because every country of Africa has some type of natural resource that it is shipping out the raw material, having materials made, and it's being shipped back and sold to Africa. That shouldn't be the case. So understand the resources you have and what is actually needed for Africa to benefit from those resources economically, meaning turning those raw material into finished goods to be able to sell to the world themselves versus that being the reverse. So understand business, go abroad and understand manufacturing, from growing your own food to clothing to manufacturing your own vehicles to being able to be in a position to create your own infrastructure. I know that the Chinese is there and they are there and they're laying a lot of infrastructure in certain countries in Africa. That should not be the case. Africa is the wealthiest continent on earth. And with all those resources, it should be able to manufacture them, sell them, take their own money, and develop their own infrastructure, from highways to internet connections for everyone. Because there's an abundance there. So take the path less traveled. That's what I would suggest. Study those Pan-Africanists who talked about economic independence for Africa. Manufacturing, that's where the heart of wealth is located. If you notice anything about China, they manufacture so much that they actually provide to the world. Africa needs to become a manufacturer because you have the natural resources that everyone wants, whether it's biological products that are being created, of clothing. You have that ability. You have to have leaders who can see that, who can help create the environment where that's a part of the economy. Because there's high-tech manufacturing. You should be able to manufacture your own cell phones, given all of the resources that other companies are using to create cell phones. So don't take the path that everyone else is taking. Travel path that is less traveled. Educate yourself on world issues. Educate yourself on the levers of an economy. Understand that your greatest resource, even though you have a great deal of minerals, are your people. So the development of your people, the education of your people. And all education doesn't necessarily mean a university. Certifications, encourage curiosity, as I've seen young Africans create certain types of products on their own, because we know that necessity is the mother of all invention. So with that being the case, encourage science, encourage math, because out of all of that, what's going to happen is innovation, creativity, new products, where Africa can control its own destiny versus having someone from the West control the destiny for them. So look abroad, look within, challenge the status quo. And I think that 10, 15, 20 years, Africa will become as dominant in the world with its economies and any other place in the world. Thanks for that question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. So we're going to let you go. Before we let you go, we want to ask this. I'm really glad that we have, I would say that you're a Pan-Africanist, knowing that we originate from the same lineage. So the question I would like to ask is, do you think there is hope for Africa, especially with the fact that a lot of our leaders always want to be under the power of the influence of the Western world? Do you think there's truly hope that we could actually accept ourselves for who we are and create things for Africans by Africans?
I do think that there's hope for that. I think that movement is happening right now with people like yourself and other people that I know of on the continent of Africa who are talking about what does it take for Africa itself, but to be able to protect itself. Because anytime you have all yourself economically as it relates to the manufacturing of goods and services to be able to sell to the world, but you have to be able to protect yourself. I think some of the most important conversations that are happening is the lowering of the borders, meaning that all of these borders that were set up between all of these different countries weren't done by Africans. Those were done in the Berlin Conference many years ago by Europeans. And so as you begin to lower the barriers or the borders where people can go from country to country without having passport, when you get to the point where you start talking about one currency across Africa, then and those conversations are happening, will you be able to create an Africa where the world will have to come asking and requesting and asking for forgiveness, but requesting to be able to do business with Africa because you have all of those resources. I know some of those conversations are happening, and I'm hopeful that those conversations will create an Africa that where everyone sees themselves as African with one currency being able to travel without having any difficulties doing so. That in and of itself will encourage trade. It will encourage, migration. It will encourage skill sets for people to go different places to do different things to help create an economy where there's one Africa and everything in Africa is created and manufactured by Africans. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Wow, thank you so much, sir. So, and I want to say thank you, Mr. Jackson, for accepting the invitation to speak, and also beautiful other speakers who have also joined us. And we hope we would have you one day physically in Africa one day. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, I look forward to that.
Yes, sir. Nice meeting you.